Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. John Searle begins his article, Minds, Brains, and Programs, which is best known for the Chinese room thought experiment, which comes a little bit later in the work, by asking a question: what psychological and philosophical significance should we attach to recent efforts at computer simulations of human cognitive capabilities? Now, this is in 1980, so obviously the AIs, the artificial intelligences that he's going to be talking about, are not quite the same as those that we are used to thinking about today, but it has a lot of applicability across the decades. And he's going to begin by saying, I want to make a distinction right off the bat between what he's going to call weak AI and strong AI. And these are not different kinds of AI, which might be a little confusing for some people. Like a weak AI can only do certain things and a strong AI can do a lot more. It's really about the level of claims that are being made about artificial intelligence programs. So proponents of weak AI are proposing one set of things that we should understand AI to be able to do or likely to do, and proponents of strong AI are making much stronger claims. So he's primarily concerned with strong AI, but we need to look at this distinction first. So he also calls weak cautious AI, right? According to weak AI, he says the principal value of the computer in the study of minds is that it gives us a very powerful tool. For example, it enables us to formulate and test hypotheses in a more rigorous and precise fashion. So there's no claims being made there that it actually is an artificial intelligence, whatever that's supposed to mean. It's just an instrument. It's just a tool for things that we know are actual intelligences, namely human beings as researchers and maybe the general public as well. What about strong AI? Well, much bigger claims being made there. He tells us that according to strong AI, the computer is not merely a tool. It is instead something else. The appropriately programmed computer really is a mind. So it's telling us something about the nature of minds, about digital machines, about the equivalence between the two of them. And so he goes on and he says, it's a mind in the sense that computers, given the right programs, can literally, this is a very important term, literally be said to understand and have other cognitive states. In strong AI, because the programmed computer has cognitive states, the programs are not mere tools that enable us to test psychological explanations. Rather, the programs are themselves the explanations. So that's a pretty decent, comprehensive understanding that's being conveyed there about what the claims are about AI, and I think we can recognize that in the AI discourse of our present. And he says, listen, there's a lot of available models out there already. I'm going to consider the work of Robert Schrank and his colleagues at Yale because I'm more familiar with that. and because it provides a clear example of the kind of work I want to examine. But what I'm saying for Schrank's program would apply to Winograd's Shrudlu or Weizenbaum's ELIZA, one of the earliest chatbots, right? A program that goes back to, if I remember correctly, the late 60s, something that we learned in basic programming how to create. And he says, indeed, any Turing machine simulation of human mental phenomena. So he's referring back to Alan Turing's The Imitation Game test for saying that a machine can think. Not actually attributing thought to it in a literal way, but a pragmatic sense of doing that. So what can we say about Schrank's program? Well, he tells us that here's how we can describe it. The aim of the program is to simulate the human ability to understand stories. So that's pretty good. Instead of just like playing chess or doing, mathematical formulations, maybe trying to create new theorems or something like that, it's doing something that's a bit more on the ground. And as we're going to see, the kind of stories that are being used as examples are ones that we can easily relate to even in our own present. So the aim is to simulate a human being's ability to understand stories. We see that term coming up again. And how do we figure that out? Well, it's characteristic that a human being can answer questions about a story even though the information they give was never explicitly stated in the story. We can read a story and we comprehend more than just the story as, you could say, a packet of information. We understand context. We understand implications. So he's going to give some examples having to do with somebody ordering a hamburger at a restaurant. So suppose you're given the following story. A man went into a restaurant, ordered a hamburger. When the hamburger arrived, it was burned to a crisp, and the man stormed out of the restaurant angrily without paying for the hamburger or leaving a tip. There's your story. Here's the question. Did the man eat the hamburger? Doesn't tell you in the story whether he did or didn't. Ask this of a human being, and unless they're a weirdo, they're going to say, no, of course he didn't eat the hamburger. He left because the hamburger was burned to a crisp, so it wasn't good food for him to eat. Computers could get that wrong, but if it's sufficiently sophisticated, maybe it will get that right. Here's, another similar question. A man went into a restaurant, ordered a hamburger. When the hamburger came, he was very pleased with it. As he left the restaurant, he gave the waitress a large tip before paying his bill. And you're asked the question, did the man eat the hamburger? So notice, same question, right? And the answer is, yes, of course. He was very pleased with it. Being pleased with it meant that he ate it. And you could say, well, there's no intrinsic connection between the two of those. Maybe he was pleased with looking at it, and he took pictures to put in his Instagram and then said, could you pack that up to go, please? I'm going to take that home, maybe give it to my dog or something. I'll save it for later. But no, we think, no, of course he ate the hamburger. Now, Schrank's machine, according to Schrank, will give answers of that sort to these sorts of questions. So when the machine is given the story and then asked the question, the machine will print out answers that we would expect human beings to give if they were being provided with similar stories. So the machine is operating on the basis of its hardware, its programming. There's no brain involved unless we want to speak in a very metaphorical sense, but the machine is giving the kind of answers that we're looking for. And so this leads to partisans of strong AI saying that the machine is not just simulating a human ability, which already would be a great thing, right? But it's doing something more. There's an also here. And he's going to point out two different things. So this is part of the claim that's being made overall with strong AI. The first one is that the machine can literally be said to understand the story and answer questions about it. So that's a big claim, right? And notice two things. So understand, very important term right there, which Searle is going to say later on, hey, we need to clarify what we mean by understand. But understanding means having cognitive states. That is, your mind actually is doing something. We might even call them not just states, but acts. Understanding could be an act of the mind. And literally is very important there. It's not just metaphorically. It's not just, when we wave our hands and we use the language in a sloppy way. Literally. The machine literally understands the story. So that's a big claim. That's what allows the machine to, as he says there, provide answers about it, or just to answer the questions about it. There's a second further claim. He says that what the machine and its program do explains what the human ability is to understand the story and answer questions about it. So that's piggybacking off of the first claim. Explaining the human ability to understand. It tells us what understanding actually is. Now, it does so in a way that we're going to say is quite reductionist in just a bit. Maybe it's possible that understanding just is certain things firing in our heads and working in a certain way, and then being able to spit out answers about things that we're being asked about. So these are the claims that are being made about artificial intelligence. And a little bit later in the discussion, once he's introduced the Chinese room experiment, he's going to come back to thinking about this as well in terms of this second part, and he's going to say the claim of a strong AI supporters is that when I understand a story in English, what I'm actually doing is the same as the person who only understands English, doesn't understand Chinese, but is able to, within the room, using some sort of formal process, take input in Chinese and give the right outputs for stories, right? They're just manipulating Chinese symbols. And the claim there overall is, listen, all we're doing as understanding intelligent beings is manipulating symbols. The person who understands English is doing it on kind of a higher level, but it's still just formal symbol manipulation, so it should be able to be emulated and, in effect, replicated by digital means rather than the sloppy wetware that we have up in our heads that we call our brains. And so this would be, a very, very strong claim about what the cognitive state or states of understanding really is, not just for computers, but for us, we human beings. So there's a lot that's really rolled in here that Searle is unpacking, involved in the claims that people are in fact making about what strong AI would involve and what it would imply.